Notre Dame just lost two of their top assistant coaches to the NFL. So how did Marcus Freeman respond? Well, he went out and hired a sitting Big Ten defensive coordinator to coach his defensive backs, and he hired one of the most experienced linebackers coaches in all of college football. We're breaking down how it happened and what it means coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish. This is your daily home for Notre Dame football. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. It is Tuesday, February 3rd, and thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you're watching along on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please follow along on your preferred platform. It really helps more Notre Dame fans find the show. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive in every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There is more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So Marcus Freeman continues to prove that he is one of the best head coaches in the country at identifying and attracting elite assistants. And in the few days since our last episode, he has made two very strong hires to coach the defensive backs and the linebackers. Now, as of this recording, Brian John Murray has not officially been named the linebackers coach, but that is expected to happen. So we're going to talk about it as if it's done. We're actually going to start today's show with Notre Dame's new defensive backs coach, Aaron Henry, and I'm going to explain why replacing Mike Mickens with a sitting Big Ten defensive coordinator is extremely impressive. Then we'll shift to the linebacker room and break down John Murray's experience and why it should stabilize the room after a lot of changes at the position lately. And finally, we are going to dive into the question a lot of fans have been asking: is the staff finally set, or could more changes still be coming before the Irish hit the field this fall? A lot to get into today. Let's start with Notre Dame hiring Illinois defensive coordinator Aaron Henry as the new defensive backs coach. I believe this is a very strong hire by Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman because Aaron Henry has a proven track record of developing high-level defensive backs. I am not worried about his mixed results as a defensive coordinator because he will not be calling the defense at Notre Dame. That responsibility belongs to Chris Ash, someone who Henry played for and has coached with in the past. And to me, it is just so impressive that Notre Dame was able to convince a current Big Ten defensive coordinator to take what is essentially a functional demotion. This isn't like hiring the defensive coordinator at Tulane or Central Michigan or anything like that. Aaron Henry was the defensive coordinator for Illinois. They just finished in the top 25 in the country the past 2 seasons. That's a pretty damn good job, but coaching the defensive backs at Notre Dame is a little bit better. And even though Aaron Henry is going to have the co-defensive coordinator title, I think this move shows Notre Dame's pull and the confidence that people have in the talent in that room, because being a position coach at Notre Dame is considered better than being a defensive coordinator at one of the 2 premier conferences in college football for, like I said, a team like Illinois, who's been pretty good the past couple seasons. As a matter of fact, it's been the 2 winningest seasons that they have had in a really long time. And Aaron Henry brings a wealth of experience, even though he's pretty young. He's 37 years old. He actually played defensive back at Wisconsin under Chris Ash. He earned first team All Big Ten honors in 2011. And he finished his playing days with 7 interceptions and 23 passes defended. Like, Aaron Henry was a damn good defensive back for the Badgers back in the day. He had a brief stint in the NFL before transitioning into coaching, and he's had several stops along the way. He got his start as a GA at Arkansas back in 2014. Then he got his first real position coaching job in 2016 at Rutgers under Chris Ash when he was the head coach. Then he left Rutgers to become the safeties coach at NC State in 2017. Then he coached the cornerbacks at NC State from 2018 through 2019. Then in 2020 was the cornerbacks coach at Vanderbilt. And then he moved to Illinois, where he became the defensive backs coach in 2021. He was the defensive backs coach there for 2 seasons. Then he was promoted to defensive coordinator in 2023 after Ryan Walters left for Purdue. But even after he became the defensive coordinator, Aaron Henry was still very involved with the defensive backs. And Notre Dame had to move pretty quickly to hire him. Once Mike Mickens left for the Baltimore Ravens, I believe that Henry immediately became a top target because of his resume developing defensive backs and obviously his long-standing relationship with Chris Ash. It is my understanding that the top 3 candidates for this job were Chris O'Leary, who was the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan, spent 6 years at Notre Dame, 3 years as the safeties coach, but he became the defensive coordinator for the LA Chargers before Notre Dame could really generate any traction there. Then there was Jay Valai, who we have talked about multiple times on the show. He's the the cornerbacks coach and the co-defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, but he actually just accepted a job with the Buffalo Bills to work with Jim Leonard, who also spent some time at Wisconsin. So they didn't get Jay Valai. And then you have Aaron Henry. There were some other candidates like Doug Belk, who is the former defensive backs coach at USC. But I think given O'Leary's ties to Notre Dame and Valai and Henry's ties to Chris Ash, those were the top three on the board at the end of the day. Again, I'm not sure they ever had much of a chance with Chris O'Leary, given the fact that he got the job with the LA Chargers, and Notre Dame went hard after Jay Valai. That's not a secret. He's very connected to Chris Ash, but according to Tim Priester and Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, it sounded like Valai was demanding quite a lot from Notre Dame in this potential role before he ultimately decided to move on to the NFL. It seems like that's kind of where he always wanted to go from the moment he became available. And even if Aaron Henry wasn't technically their first choice, I think the Notre Dame staff is very happy to have him on board. Henry also received interest from the NFL this offseason. As a matter of fact, he interviewed with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception around Aaron Henry because when Notre Dame hired him, there were a lot of people out there who were calling it a home run hire, but meanwhile, there were some Illinois fans who seemed to be rejoicing at the fact that Aaron Henry was leaving. I think the criticism of Henry as a defensive coordinator is totally fair. The Illinois defense the past few seasons since he's been the DC has been average to below average, but it is completely irrelevant to what his role is going to be at Notre Dame. There are plenty of great position coaches who are not good coordinators, and there are plenty of great coordinators who do not make good head coaches. This is like when someone who is, let's say, an incredible salesperson at your job gets promoted into a managerial role, and then suddenly they're miserable and they're not that effective. It's not because they are bad at the job that they were hired for originally. It's because that managing people, budgets, and sitting in meetings all day is a completely different skill set. So Notre Dame is not hiring Aaron Henry, the manager. They're hiring the salesperson. Aaron Henry is going back to the thing that he is elite at. I also don't think this is a situation where Henry was being forced out at Illinois by any means, because according to John Bryce of Football Scoop, Henry signed a contract extension with Illinois before last season. And I think from his perspective, he realized he has a lot more to learn as a coach. Like I said, he's only 37 years old, so he has a long career ahead of him. He looked at the talent Notre Dame has coming back in the secondary. Plus, he's going to have a boss in Chris Ash that he is extremely familiar with. And he probably sees the job that the other assistants at Notre Dame are getting and realizes this is the best opportunity for him to learn and develop. So he's ready to take the next step in his career. He can focus on coaching DBs and recruiting the best defensive backs in the country, and then he can let Chris Ash handle the scheme and play calling, and they can work together because they've worked together well in the past. It is actually the rare win-win when a coach leaves. I think Notre Dame is making a really great hire in Aaron Henry, and I think, with Illinois, now they get a chance to try someone else at defensive coordinator. And for Henry, he's able to take a valuable step forward in growing his career, even if the title might seem like a bit of a demotion, because now he gets to learn alongside one of the best staffs in the country and coach a unit that I believe is going to be the best in college football next season. So I think it's just a great situation for both parties here. And Henry's resume as a developer of defensive backs is extremely impressive. In 2022, which was his second year coaching the defensive backs at Illinois, that defense ranked number one nationally in scoring defense, interceptions, takeaways, and pass efficiency defense. That's according to Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily. And that secondary also produced Devin Witherspoon, who is a top 5 NFL draft pick and multiple defensive backs drafted in the first 3 rounds. That defense essentially got Ryan Walters the head coaching job at Purdue. But as we all witnessed in 2024, Walters was not ready for that kind of promotion. Yet another example of a really great coordinator who is not a good head coach. And even after Henry became the DC, he helped Illinois defensive back Xavier Scott earn first-team All-Big Ten honors. Scott finished near the top of the conference in interceptions, and I believe he was injured for most of this past season, which is also a big reason why that Illinois defense struggled while Aaron Henry was the defensive coordinator. And he specializes in man coverage, which is exactly what Marcus Freeman wants out of his secondary. Illinois ranked 20th and 4th nationally in EPA per dropback in 2021 and 2022, back when Henry was the defensive backs coach. And their coverage grades ranked 22nd and 3rd nationally by Pro Football Focus, according to Jamie Uyeyama, a big friend of the show. They ran a ton of man-to-man, even more than Notre Dame. They ran man-to-man over 70% of the time in 2022. That is a staggering number for a college football defense. And they were very physical and they were very aggressive, which has become a staple of the Notre Dame secondary under Marcus Freeman. That secondary produced 4 NFL draft picks in 2 seasons, and all 4 were selected in the first 2 days of the draft. Now, after 2022, things began to fall off. The talent in that room was a lot different than what it was in 2022. They had to completely change their scheme. They went from playing man-to-man 70% of the time in 2022 to just above 30% in 2025, and the production dipped across the board. I do not believe lack of talent is going to be an issue, though, when you're at Notre Dame and you have Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and DJ McKinney and Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson and then Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and Jane Sanders behind them. And you have the 5-star freshman Joey O'Brien and Kerry Adams as well. If I had one concern about Henry, it's going to be his ability to recruit at the level that is necessary. I'm not even going to say recruit at the level that Mike Mickens did, because that might be too high of a bar to clear. Mickens was one of the best recruiters in the entire country, so it's unlikely that Henry is going to be able to live up to that. But in fairness to him, it's going to be a lot easier to recruit at Notre Dame than Illinois, given the recent success, especially at that position, and all the resources he is going to have at his disposal. He is going to have to prove himself on the recruiting trail, but he's also going to be getting help along the way. Replacing Mike Mickens was never going to be easy, but I think Notre Dame did the best they possibly could in this scenario. They hired someone who has coached elite man-to-man corners. He's produced NFL draft picks, and he understands exactly what this defense asks of its defensive backs with Chris Ash, the defensive coordinator. It reinforces Notre Dame's defensive identity. That's going to stay intact, and Ash is building a coaching staff that he trusts, and they trust one another. This is not a situation where he has to adapt to the position coaches. He gets to hire his guys, and Aaron Henry is clearly one of his guys. I think most of all, it's the standard that Marcus Freeman has set for his staff. When he loses a great assistant, he goes out there. He doesn't wait around or take the easy route or anything like that. He's willing to go out and convince a defensive coordinator to leave and take a job as a position coach, because that is how desirable working on his staff has become. We're going to have to wait and see how it turns out. You never know for sure with an assistant coaching hire, but I love this hire. I think it's going to turn out great for Notre Dame and this defense. All right, coming up, let's dive into Notre Dame's expected linebackers coach. Brian Jean-Marie has been coaching linebackers longer than most of these players have been alive, and he might be able to take an already great room to another level in 2026. That's coming up next. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first watch and listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It is the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, for those who believe there's more to the score than what's on the screen. When I think about what that really means, I think about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. 4 years in, and what stands out isn't just the wins, it's the way that he has built his program. The culture, the accountability, the way players talk about preparation and trust in one another. It's the work that happens long before kickoff, in meetings, in practices, and how standards are set every single day. That's what moves a program forward. Not just the final score, but everything that leads up to it. It reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in on every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda, because there's more to you. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Now let's dive into Notre Dame's more recent coaching hire. Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports reported on Monday that Notre Dame is expected to name former Michigan linebackers coach Brian Jean-Marie as their next linebackers coach to replace Al Washington. Jean Marie is a proven linebackers coach with a wealth of experience who has coached at the highest levels of college football. He got his first job coaching linebackers in college back in 2004. Around that time, I was just starting the third grade. The iPhone was still like 3 years away from being introduced to the world. And Jean Marie has been coaching linebackers every single day since 2004. So it's been a minute for this guy. And for Notre Dame, this feels like a move that should stabilize the room a little bit after experiencing multiple changes at the position once Max Bullough left to take the job at Michigan State earlier this offseason, and then Al Washington followed late last week. And this move also reinforces that Marcus Freeman and Chris Ash want coaches who fit a very specific defensive identity. Let's dive into his background. So Jean Marie has been coaching linebackers for over 2 decades. He played at Appalachian State, got his first job as a GA at Louisville way back in 2000. And then he became the linebackers coach at Georgia Tech in 2004, and he was there through 2009. Then he went back to Louisville in 2010 to become the assistant head coach and linebackers coach for 5 years. Then he moved on to Texas, where he was working under Charlie Strong in 2015 and 2016. And then things kind of went south there. He followed Charlie Strong to South Florida. 2017, he was the assistant head coach, actually the defensive coordinator for 3 years, as well as the linebackers coach. Then he left in 2020 to become the linebackers coach at Michigan. And then in 2021, left to join the SEC. He was the linebackers coach at Tennessee for 3 seasons before he went back to Michigan for another stint with the Wolverines. He was a linebackers coach and defensive run game coordinator at Michigan in 2024 and 2025. And then Kyle Whittingham was hired to be the new head coach for the Wolverines after the whole Sharon Moore debacle there. Kyle Whittingham was bringing his staff from Utah with him, was not going to retain Jean Marie, so then he actually accepted a job at Georgia Tech. We're going to get to that in a second. For his career, he has coached 10 NFL draft picks, including 2 first-rounders in Calvin Pryor and Marcus Smith out of Louisville, and Notre Dame was in a very interesting spot once Al Washington left pretty late in the coaching cycle. He left for a job in the NFL, so obviously when you're going to take a job in the NFL, it's going to happen a little bit later than if you leave to take another job in college more often than not. But if you think about it, news broke that Washington accepted the job with the Dolphins last Thursday. So it really only took 3 to 4 days for Notre Dame to hire a replacement. And after Washington left, I had actually heard the staff already had someone in mind. I just didn't know who. We talked about that on the mailbag last week. And then on Friday morning, there were multiple reports out there that Notre Dame had zeroed in on a former member of the staff and current Vanderbilt linebackers coach and co-DC Nick Lazinski. Pete Nakos of On3 also reported that Lazinski was a top candidate, but then you had other reports, credible reports, that Lazinski wasn't even a candidate at all. So I'm not sure what to believe about Lazinski, but I did hear from a trusted source that former Notre Dame linebacker Maurice Crum Jr., who is currently the linebackers coach and co-DC at SMU, was a very serious candidate at one point, but I believe that he just had a child, and I'm not sure his family was ready to move from Dallas to South Bend at this point in time. Again, I don't know how serious that candidacy truly was either, but I do know that Notre Dame at least explored him as a candidate. Ultimately, Notre Dame went with Brian Jean Marie, who has significantly more experience than both of the people I just mentioned, and more experience than Al Washington and Max Bullough coaching linebackers. Even though Brian Jean Marie doesn't have direct ties to Chris Ash in the same way that Aaron Henry and Charlie Partridge do, he shares the same agent as Marcus Freeman, so there is at least some familiarity there. And the tricky thing with Brian Jean Marie is he had actually just accepted the linebackers job at Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago, as we mentioned earlier. Now, that might seem a little bit strange, right? Going from a place like Michigan to Georgia Tech, that seems like a big downgrade. But remember, Whittingham is bringing in his own guys, which a lot of new head coaches do. And I think the job at Georgia Tech is a lot more appealing now than it used to be because they have a good head coach in Brent Key. And Key has done a really good job revamping his staff as of late. Plus, Jean Marie is familiar with Atlanta. He's familiar with Georgia Tech from the early days of his coaching career. That is where he got his start. So maybe it would be somewhat of a homecoming for him. Well, it might be the shortest-lived homecoming of all time, maybe outside of Chris Paul going back to the LA Clippers, and then they just cut him in the middle of the night. It wasn't that toxic, right? Or at least I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure that there's people at Georgia Tech who aren't happy that Jean Marie is leaving after, 2 weeks after accepting the job. But look, clearly being the linebackers coach at Notre Dame is on a little bit different level than Georgia Tech. So despite all that uncertainty, despite some of the logistical nightmares that Notre Dame probably had to deal with to get this done with the buyout and things like that, this was a big coup. But there's sort of more to the story with the buyout and the contract situation as well, because technically, Jean-Marie is still under contract with Michigan, and they are going to remain on the hook for part of a salary. According to John Bryce from Football Scoop, they had him under contract through at least early 2027 at over $900,000 per year. The fact that they were paying him that kind of money tells you the type of demand that he has. John Bryce also mentioned that the reason that Jean-Marie left Tennessee to become the linebackers coach at Michigan again back in 2024 was because Michigan was willing to give him a 3-year deal. He's obviously not going to be there for 3 years, but with the assistant coaches and the importance of having a great staff now, these guys are getting paid more than they ever had before, and they're also getting longer contracts, even though there's still plenty of movement at the assistant level. But it doesn't really matter what the details are with the contract. What matters is that Jean-Marie's recent production is extremely relevant to Notre Dame's needs. Marcus Freeman always emphasizes the importance of running the football on offense and stopping the run on defense. I know it's a cliche. You probably heard it 1,000 times. It's kind of like an old school mentality, but it still tracks in today's day and age. If you remember in that video that surfaced after Notre Dame came back to beat Penn State at halftime, what was the thing that Marcus Freeman emphasized? He says they got to stop the run on defense and run the ball on offense. And then Notre Dame went out there, came back, and earned a spot in the national championship. And wherever Jean-Marie goes, they are usually excellent at defending the run. When Jean-Marie returned to Michigan in 2024, that linebacker unit was part of a defense that finished in the top 10 nationally in total defense, and they ranked 5th stopping the run. They held 8 opponents under 100 rushing yards. When he was at Tennessee, his linebacker unit ranked top 10 nationally in tackles for loss in all 3 seasons that he was there, and they finished top 10 in sacks once and top 20 nationally in rushing defense and red zone twice, according to Matt Freeman. His defenses consistently played fast, downhill, and physical, which is exactly what you want out of a linebacker unit. Notre Dame wants their linebackers attacking, not catching, not waiting. They want to be playing downfield or downhill and recognizing the play and then making a play on the ball. And given Jean-Marie's wealth of experience and the amount of proven talent at linebacker, I think the staff can get pretty creative with how they use different players. Jean-Marie has plenty of tools to work with, right? And Drake Bowen entering his senior year. You've got Jaden Osprey, who's probably ready to take on a bigger role. Kingston Viliamu-Asa is an elite player once he returns from his injury. Jalen Snead is coming back for a 5th year. And you've got Man Framo, the highly touted recruit out of California, who is going to be entering his 2nd year with the program. I think he is poised for a breakout season this year. And I also think his track record as a recruiter is pretty impressive. So Jean-Marie's bio on the Michigan website literally includes this line, quote, "An ace recruiter, Jean-Marie has helped produce top 15 signing classes at Texas 3 times, Tennessee twice, at Georgia Tech, and at Michigan." Now, this is somewhat ironic considering I saw some Michigan fans were being pretty critical of his ability as a recruiter, but this is the same guy who convinced former Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramosa's younger brother, Nathaniel, a borderline 5-star, a player that Notre Dame really wanted, to pick Michigan over Notre Dame. So that has to count for something, right? And we're going to find out quickly just how effective he is on the recruiting trail. Right now, Amari Irvin is the only linebacker commit Notre Dame has in the class of 2027. And look, he's a damn good player. I'm really excited about him. Plays for IMG Academy, one of the best high school football programs in the country. But as we talked about last week on the show, Notre Dame needs at least 2 more high-end linebacker recruits in this class because they have not recruited that position exceptionally well in recent years. They've had some blue-chip guys like Framo and like KVA, but I think as a whole, they haven't recruited as well as they have a defensive back. So it's going to be on Jean-Marie to help get this done. But like Aaron Henry, Jean-Marie is going to have a lot more resources and a head coach who's one of the best recruiters in the entire country. So Notre Dame was able to go out there and hire a battle-tested linebackers coach with a ton of experience, and he's also developed NFL-caliber linebackers before. He's led defenses that are elite at stopping the run and creating negative plays. So after a brief period of instability, this feels like a steadying presence. And the bottom line here is this is another very impressive hire by Marcus Freeman and one that should show results quickly on the field. All right, so Notre Dame has addressed defensive backs. They've stabilized linebacker, but the question still remains, is this staff actually set? Because there are 2 names you absolutely need to keep an eye on, and the timing matters more than anything. Stick around. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches, and with sponsored jobs, your posts get seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. We are back here on Locked On Irish with more coaching discussion. It has been the theme as of late, but hey, that's what happens when your linebackers coach and defensive backs coach all leave within the same week. But now that Notre Dame has had to rehaul basically its entire defensive staff, minus the coordinator, obviously, a lot of fans are asking, is the staff set? We're already in February. Spring practice is a little over a month away. I think the short answer there is no. And I'm not saying a move is going to happen. I'm just saying we don't know. It is foolish to say that there won't be any more movement at this time until literally every single job in college and every single job in the NFL is filled, and specifically the NFL. So I think I'm going to enforce a new rule for myself that we are going to follow on this show. The staff is not set until Notre Dame takes the field for training camp in the fall, because you never really know what can happen. That might seem extreme. I think most people would point to the start of spring practice, but in college football, we have seen coaches leave either during or even after spring practice. It has not happened with Notre Dame, but it has happened before. And before the 2023 season, Notre Dame, or I should say former Notre Dame strength coach, Matt Balis, literally quit the day before training camp. Now, those were obviously different circumstances, but the point remains. You never really know. And during the Friday mailbag last week, we discussed how special teams coordinator Marty Biagi and strength and conditioning coach Loren Landow were receiving interest from NFL teams. In Biagi's case, he was actually getting interest from Ohio State as well. They were pursuing him pretty aggressively, but they just hired Illinois special teams coordinator. Biagi might still be receiving interest from the NFL. Haven't heard a ton on that front lately. Meanwhile, Landow's name continues to come up with the Oakland Raiders after they hired Clint Kubiak to be their head coach. Those two have a history together from their time with the Denver Broncos, but this is not a done deal by any means. There are people at Notre Dame who feel very confident about retaining Loren Landow, and I believe they just gave him a raise or they reworked his contract or something like that to keep him around. Still, he's someone you absolutely do not want to lose, even though you don't really see it on game day in the fall. Like, he's not out there calling plays or anything like that. He is so crucial to this team, especially this time of year. So Notre Dame could go out and they could hire another quality special teams coordinator if Biagi were to leave. But replacing a strength and conditioning coach, especially one as good as Landow, during literally one of the most important times on the calendar for the workout program could be really difficult. Could they hire a quality replacement if Landow left? Of course. But they would have to expedite the process given the timing, and that would just be a difficult situation for Freeman and the players who are in the midst of those workouts right now, and everyone would just sort of have to adjust on the fly. And ultimately, I think Biagi and Landow are going to stay with Notre Dame, but look, things happen so quickly, and you never really know. If the staff stays how it is currently constructed, I still think it's one of the best coaching staffs in all of college football, despite the turnover. For as much time as we have spent talking about all the changes on defense, Notre Dame is set to return every coach on the offensive staff as of today, knock on wood. Mike Denbrock is going to enter his third season as the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, also his third season as the tight ends coach. But I think the fact that he's going into his third year as the offensive coordinator is huge for the entire unit, but especially for CJ Carr, who's going to be entering his second straight season as the starting quarterback, but it's also Carr's third season under Mike Denbrock as the OC. And even though Carr didn't play barely at all, like I think he took a couple snaps against Purdue in that blowout as a freshman, and he never really had any chance to start over Riley Leonard, he was still a sponge. He was still learning the playbook. He was still watching as much film as he could and learning from Mike Denbrock, even though he wasn't playing on Saturdays. And I believe that because of the effort that he put in during that season, that helped set him up for success during his first season as a starting quarterback and only his second year playing college football. So the fact that those two are going to be together for the third straight year is really important. They also bring back Jaywan Sider as the running backs coach. He is clearly one of the best running backs coaches in the country. Gino Guidugli is entering his fourth season as Notre Dame's quarterbacks coach. Joe Rudolph is going to be entering his fourth season coaching the Notre Dame offensive line. Like, that kind of continuity is more important on an offense that has to replace a lot of key guys like Jeremiah Love, like Malachi Fields, like Billy Strouth on the offensive line. The defense, meanwhile, returns a ton of talent and experience on the field, so they're better positioned to handle that kind of coaching turnover. Plus, if you look at the staff changes, I think they upgraded on the defensive line with Charlie Partridge. I made the joke before that the way that so many people talk about him, it's like Vince Lombardi returning from the grave to coach Notre Dame's defensive line. Like, that is how highly people speak of Charlie Partridge and his ability to develop defensive lines that didn't have nearly the amount of talent that Notre Dame is going to have next year and beyond. I think when you look at linebackers coach, Al Washington may have been better suited coaching linebackers than he was in the defensive line, but I think Brian Jean-Marie is probably a wash compared to Washington, no pun intended there. And he's probably a wash with Max Bulla as well. Brian Jean-Marie is, a lot more experience than those guys, but I think Max Bulla was really highly respected in the Goog. So I don't want to say it's an upgrade there. I just don't know enough about the three of them, their coaching acumen just yet. So still, either way, Notre Dame replaced Bulla in Washington as well as they possibly could have in this scenario. And then at defensive back, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Yeah, it's a downgrade. That's just the reality. And that is not meant to disparage Aaron Henry at all. Like, I just laid out why I love the hire. I think he could do a really good job at Notre Dame. But Mike Mickens is Mike Mickens. He's arguably the best position coach in all of college football, or at least he was before he left for the NFL. So overall, yes, you weren't able to replace a like-for-like situation with Mike Mickens, but this staff is in excellent shape. And Marcus Freeman is proven to be elite at identifying and hiring talent to support him. And yes, it's disappointing whenever a coach leaves, and it causes some short-term issues. But the fact that so many of these coaches are getting great opportunities after working under Freeman only makes Notre Dame an even more desirable destination for other coaches. And we're seeing that in real time as Charlie Partridge left the NFL to return to college and work at Notre Dame. We're seeing it with Aaron Henry leaving his post as a Big Ten defensive coordinator to coach defensive backs at Notre Dame. And now we're seeing it with Brian Jean-Marie, who just left a job he accepted weeks ago for the opportunity to coach at Notre Dame. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And if you're enjoying the show, remember, like the video if you're watching on YouTube, rate the show 5 stars, and leave a review if you're listening to the podcast. I really do appreciate it. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. One quick thing before we wrap things up here. Do want to send my prayers to Lou Holtz and the Holtz family. Saw some reports this weekend that he is in hospice care. There were some reports that he had actually passed as of this recording. I do not believe that has happened yet, but clearly he is at the end of the line here. Lou Holtz is obviously a Notre Dame legend, a college football legend. Just hoping for the best for him and his family during these trying times, but nothing but love for sweet Lou. I'm going to be back here, same time tomorrow. I'll see you then.